Wow. Can you all hear me? Everybody can hear me. Okay. If you would do me a favor, it's public. If you're able, um, for whatever reason now, I'm hearing myself twice because I think I have my Facebook on and this. Is that the reason? Okay, thank y'all. So what I need to do I need to shut my Facebook down?
Yeah, you this portable power washer.
What do I need to do now?
Do you have it open in a browser or on your phone?
On the browser up here.
Okay, I think you'll be safe to close the browser out now that you have it open on the Zoom. Somebody
Okay.
please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to speak uh prematurely.
Well, look, I'm already up here, so I hope it's right. All right, here we go. Here we go. Yes, we are live. Can you all check to make sure you can see the live? I made it. Um, it should be live now because I'm getting a lot of messages. Are you live yet? Are you live yet? And yes, we are. Yes, we are live now. Thank you all. There we go. I see us. I see us, and we are live. Good evening, everybody. I thank you all again so much for joining me. This is a very important conversation that we're getting ready to have. And so I do want to do some introductions so the people who are watching, they know exactly who we have and the great amount of expertise and knowledge that we have here with us. And so, again, I am so honored to host this important conversation. And it is presented by my consulting company, Access Granted. And so I'm very proud to be here with you all tonight. So tonight we are joined by, in my opinion, some very distinguished educational leaders across North Carolina and beyond, leaders who have been a great influence in my life and who have dedicated their lives to students, to schools, and to the future of education. And so we are here because I think that we must ask the urgent question and very necessary question, and that is, have test scores become the purpose of education instead of a tool within education? And I hope that makes sense. I think somewhere along the way, schools have shifted. We talked about this just before we logged into the live. Students, began to see themselves as scores. I think teachers began to feel evaluated more than they feel empowered. Leaders began making decisions based on numbers rather than humanity. And yet we know schools were never meant to produce test scores. Schools were meant to produce thinkers, leaders, citizens, problem solvers, dreamers, all the things. Tonight is not about rejecting accountability, it's about redefining success. So it's about asking, what kind of education system do our students deserve? Number one. And what kind of future are we actually preparing them for? Mr. Perry, you spoke on that early, and I hope you get a chance to share that in this conversation. And so, again, I'm honored to be joined by extraordinary voices who are helping us reimagine what is possible. So, let's begin. Real quick, if you all would do me a favor, I would love for you, for our viewing audience, to introduce yourselves to them. So again, they know exactly who's at the table, that this is not just another conversation. We actually have boots on the ground. We have folk who are working hard, who have been working hard to reimagine education in the lives of just folks, right? Our students, our leaders, the world. And I think we have a great panel of folks here. So Mr. Edmonds, I'm just gonna go in the areas. I'm gonna do cold calls, how I see you all show up. So Ms. Edmonds, if you would introduce yourself first, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. And welcome again.
Thank you. My name is Monica Edmonds, and I'm the Executive Director of Curriculum Instruction for Northampton County Schools. But foremost, I'm a teacher, and that's the one role that I will never give up. So it's nice to be here.
Thank you. Welcome. All right, Dr. Hunter.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Tristan Hunter. I am an assistant principal at Northwest Collegiate and Technical Academy in Halifax.
Viewing audience to KP Perry. So again,
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenneth Perry Jr. I'm a proud principal of Southeast Collegiate Preparatory Academy in Halifax County Schools.
All right, Dr. Stewart.
Good evening, everyone. Dr. Andre Stewart. I am the current Chief of Operations for Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools, a proud educator of the Roanoke Valley for over 20 years in Roanoke Rapids, Halifax County, and Weldon City Schools. I taught in all three, so I'm proud of that.
Yes. Dr. Lakeisha Boone.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Lakeisha Boone. I am the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources for Craven County Schools, teacher, educator, leader.
All the things.
All the things.
Yes. Miss Erica Smith.
Hello, everyone. My name is Erica. I'm an engineer by training, an educator by trade, and I'm an evangelist by call of God. I have a passion for STEM, and I moved from engineering to now I'm a secondary instructional specialist over core content areas. I teach for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I'm just so excited to have this conversation. I'd like to say now that I am an engineer of minds for 21st century competencies, careers, and citizenship.
I love that. I love that. Dr. Mo.
Hello, Dr. Mo. As Dr. Grant stated, as Miss Monica Edmonds said, I'm an educator first, but I'm currently a program mentor with Western Governors University.
Thank you. Dr. James E. Ford. And listen, I got to say it. Give me room to say it.
Stop.
Dr. James E. Ford. You got to let me do it.
I love my folks. They ain't never going to let you live it down, though. Good evening, Dr. James E. Ford, former CMS educator, current executive director at the Center for Racial Equity and Education. We go by CREED, and pleased to be with y'all this evening.
Yes. Miss Shakiria Barnes.
Good evening, everyone, and I bring you greetings from Savannah Chatham County Public School System, where I am a charter school liaison. But I have to say, I am a lifelong educator and a product of Weldon City Schools in Halifax County, North Carolina. I'm delighted to be here this evening.
Thank you and welcome. Dr. Tevis T. Harris.
Good evening, everyone. I am the Dr. Tevis T. Harris, as she said. I am the very, very, very honored and proud principal of William R. Davie Middle STEM Academy in Halifax County, North Carolina. Glad to be with you guys tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Last but definitely not least, my friend, my brother, Dr. Quadric Witherspoon.
And he already know. Yo to the good noob on the line. So I am Dr. Quadric Witherspoon, the proud principal of Rocky Mount Prep Mighty Middle School, and originally from Bethel, North Carolina. Shout out to Bucktown, absolutely.
Thank you. So, and again, I'm Dr. Kenyon Grant. I didn't tell you what I do, but I am the proud principal of Northwest Collegiate and Technical Academy in Halifax County. I also have a educational consulting business called Access Granted. And so we'll share more about that toward the end, but I want to jump right on in now because I'm excited about this. So we're ready, let's go. My first question, and for those of you who are viewing, because I can see those who are logging in and I appreciate that. For those who are viewing, please make sure that you join in by asking any questions that you like in the chat, and I'll make sure that our leaders have the opportunity to answer those questions for you, okay? So first question, and anybody can take this one. So no cold calls on this, but feel free to, get off mute and let's go for it. My question is, when did testing shift from being a tool to measure learning? to becoming the driver of education and learning? And what did we lose in that shift? Let me know if I need to kind of say that again, but when did we shift from, testing just being a tool to measure learning, right? Now it's the driver of all the things. And then what did we end up losing when we shifted to this high stakes testing?
I want to chime in on that.
Yes.
So one of the things that I will say is in the modern day, what works is not kept. Okay. We are systematically changing the rules of education all of the time. And that includes the laws regarding education. I believe that it all starts with our legislators because they are the ones that make the governing rules for how schools are run, no matter what type of schools they are.
Right.
And when school report cards and things like that became the force of, I'll even take it back to the incentive days. When schools performed, they received all of that money. And that became a driving force of where people wanted to work because that ABC money, when I began teaching, everybody got it. It just wasn't your core teachers. Everybody at the schools received that money. And I believe that changed the dynamics of where people wanted to work and how they performed. And I would say, I know we have a couple of charter school people here. I believe when I first taught, we did not see that flexibility. And so, as someone who has served in rural, as a teacher in rural low performing school districts for the vast majority of my career, it seems like that game has changed as legislation has changed.
Right.
As an HR person, I'm assistant superintendent, but these are factors that I have to look at annually, not only with teachers, but with your administrators. When the students are not performing and the teachers are not performing, then the principal is not performing.
Right.
And now we have general statutes that say if you're not performing, you can lose your position, you can lose your job, or be demoted to another job. And we all know that any incentive to change takes time. Change does not occur overnight.
Right.
And as someone who has worked in schools that did not have the learning culture per se, it takes time to build that. It takes time to get a staff to invest in that. And I just truly believe that a lot of that starts with our legislation because we don't make the rules. We just simply abide by what we have to do or what we're told to do as educators. I look at the fact that most of our kids or student scholars, however you want to call them, are being led by groups who do not have the content that our teachers used to have, but that's because the system is forcing them out.
Yeah.
When you have been in education over 20 years and the salary schedule comes out and you are making less money to come to work to do this work, it's disheartening. And you see all of that prior knowledge, all of that culture leaving a school building, but these are not the things that we are in control of.
Yeah, I would like to jump in. Is if that's okay? I'm sorry, Dr. Harris. I promise I'll be brief and I'll kick it to you. I would, and going back to the question, I think if I want to say maybe 2001, No Child Left Behind. It was the basis for leaving the children behind, because we began all of a sudden to focus on testing,
Right.
um, and it has turned us into, I hate to use the word, but I'm going to use it. It turns us into monsters of accountability only for the test. We no longer teach critical thinking.
That's right.
We don't teach children how to think and arrive at an answer. We are teaching them how they can get into the HOTS, the higher order thinking skills, so we can answer enough questions on an EOC or an EOG so
Right.
that they can be proficient. Because, you know, some of us have sat in those seats and we understand that Dr. Boone is exactly right. As a principal, the reason that I'm doing observations and I'm doing walkthroughs and I'm doing those things, if you're not careful, it's not because we're trying to produce high level thinkers and
Mhm.
great educators. It's
Mhm.
because we're trying to make sure that we reach expected growth or that we
Right.
exceed expected growth. And so
Right.
I think we have to trace it all the way back to No Child Left Behind because that was the changing of the game, and it was the
Sure.
changing of the guard when it came down to it. And some of us have been around long enough to remember that shift. And now it's just pressure packed every day. When you walk in, you have to talk about benchmark testing, and what are we doing for benchmark testing? So if we're not careful, we will become products of the test and teaching to the test instead of having children and developing critical thinkers, which they will need in life. All
So,
right.
Dr. Stewart, real quick before we throw it to or pass it to Dr. Harris, you said something around teaching to the test. Now they discourage that. I think we hear it all the time. Don't teach to the test. Don't teach to the test. But everything that you're asking us to do, and maybe ask is not even the right word. You're forcing us to do is making us teach to the test because we're teaching students, again, like I said earlier, to choose A through D, right? We're doing process of elimination. Either you get two right, you get two wrong, then, choose. So then, Dr. Harris, maybe you can allow this and whoever wants to jump into this, was this gradual? Was this intentional? How did we get here to now we don't have critical thinkers? Because even in some of the classes that I or students that I talk to, if you don't give it to them, they're not going to try to process through it, right? What we call productive struggle. And so my concern is, I think this kind of snuck in, my opinion, or do you feel like this was intentional for whatever reason?
Dr.
Well,
Grant.
okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go
I'm
ahead,
gonna say this and I'm
Stuart.
going on mute because I'm not going to monopolize this conversation tonight. But it's good. I want to lift up the portion that we're dealing with human beings. So you're dealing with teachers who are humans.
Yeah.
So if a teacher does not get students that will produce, their EVOS scores are low.
Mm.
And the fallout and the trickle down from that is all of a sudden we are putting them on plans, action plans, and MIPS and BIPS and all of those types of tips,
Yeah.
because they are not teaching to the test. So we have
Yes.
to realize that we're talking about human beings, that their livelihood is all based upon student success. And how do you get student success? What you just said, it was an unintentional result, but it happened across the board that
Mm.
we had people that started to push and teach to that test. Okay, I'm going on mute now.
That was good.
Harris, were you going to jump in on this before I jump in?
No,
Go
you
ahead.
can.
I wanted to jump in when Stuart talked about the federal policy, No Child Left Behind, and we always hear this: it left no teacher left in the classroom, and I really believe this was an unintended consequence. And so, along with the federal policy of No Child Left Behind, North Carolina had the race to the top, and that
Yeah.
race to the top,
Exactly.
Dr. Boone, was when they started talking about that money, and we're
That's right.
humans. And so, in every other profession, you do have performance bonuses. And so,
Mhm.
I think that what started out trying to make sure all students were achieving, the unintended consequences of it was the monster that we have. And, I am a proponent of strong public schools. I love the KIP program, the Knowledge is Power program. But There was one quote that they had, we learn for life, not just school, or we learn
Mm,
not just for school, but for life. And so when we started having that high stakes testing, we could not help but respond in a way that made our pacing guides now prioritize testable standards
true.
as opposed to being able to prioritize a deeper understanding for our students. And I'm
Mhm.
telling you, that was the shift in the transition where there was no longer the joy of learning because every child now is identifying themselves and their worth and their value by where they fall on a scale.
Yeah.
And the sad reality of it is that once we put in the place the race to the top and then started slapping on those report card grades A through
Hmm.
F, do you know how demoralizing that is? And the
Yeah.
system in which we calculated these scores that gave you the grade, it did not determine which schools or which divisions had smarter students. It only shined light on who were the poorer districts,
There
the
you go.
underfunded districts.
There
And
you
so
go.
it did not show how intelligent the students were. It
Hmm.
just determined how resourced or under resourced that they were. So I'm with you. It didn't start out that way. That was not the motivation behind it. However, because of the way it was deployed and launched, it became the monster that it is now. And
Yes.
after 30 years of high stakes testing, our students are not becoming smarter.
Exactly.
And I
I
want
Exactly.
do want to piggy.
to share,
Oh,
Erica, Miss Smith, because that takes us to Dr. Grant. What did we lose? And the first thing that I thought about that we lost is the breadth of learning. You
Mm,
know, because when test drives instruction, and I'm an artsy person, art shrinks, music shrinks,
yeah. Yeah.
project-based learning shrinks,
Yeah.
right? And then STEM innovation, Ms. Smith, narrows to tested standards, right? And so learning becomes then what will be tested instead of what is worth knowing,
That's right.
right?
That
And then
was
the
good.
second thing that I thought about too was intellectual curiosity.
Mm,
Dr. Ford, and you may can speak to this too.
Stifles that.
Yeah. So students began asking, is this on the test? Right?
Yes.
Instead of why does this matter?
yeah. Am I going to get a grade for this? They don't want to do anything outside of that. Am I going to get a grade for it?
Right. Because why does this matter? And then, we lost deep inquiry right there. Right. And then we also lost exploration.
Yeah.
Right. And then time for struggle and productive confusion. Right. You talked about the productive struggle, but that productive confusion, we lost the time for that. And then the third thing that I thought about, y'all, that we lost was and it's what Mr. Perry was also saying, that professional autonomy.
Mm,
Teachers lost their professional autonomy because I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Back
mhm.
in the 80s and 90s, and I know the historians are on the call, right? Testing was used as a checkpoint, right?
Yes.
Right, it was used as a checkpoint. It was a periodic measure, just like you said earlier. It was a CAT test. There was one indicator among many indicators, right? And
Hmm.
it was less tied to funding. But then, of course, like Dr. Stewart said, No Child Left Behind came in, right? In 2001, I think it was 2001 when No Child Left
Hmm.
Behind came in.
Hmm.
And then I think the question, it moved from basically, let's see how students are doing to your survival depends on these things, on these scores. Your very survival in this system depends on your student scores. And then
Yeah.
of course um it moved to evaluation and competition. That's when the race to the top moved us from to evaluation and competition. And so, breadth of learning, as I said before, I think intellectual curiosity is the second one that I said is what we lost. And that professional autonomy is the third thing that I think we lost. Instead of teachers being the designers of learning, right? We've now become deliverers of pacing guides, really.
Mm, yeah.
Correct.
I
So
wanted to
Dr.
revisit
Ford
your
and then
initial.
Dr. Ford and then Dr. Hunter. I can see them in the chat. I'm sorry. And those of you who are viewing, please make sure you ask your questions. Any questions that you may have, please ask, and I'll deliver them so that they'll answer your questions for you. We can't hear you, Doc.
Can y'all hear me?
There you go.
Okay. I'm geeked out over here because I'm hearing everybody give a piece, right? Because it's a large question, right?
Mhm.
But just to narrate it on a timeline, right? You're talking about the civil rights movement, and what comes out of that ESEA. These are equity education reforms, right?
Yeah.
So you get Title One, right? You get Title Nine reforms. You get the law remedies. So those are equity-based reforms, and then right around the late 2000s, we decided that that wasn't the way to close the gap. That we needed accountability. Right, that we needed to hold people accountable for where they were, what they were, and were not doing, and that's where you got the No Child Left Behind and the Race to the Top stuff. And we looked and we pointed at teachers and said it's the teachers' fault. If you ain't doing what you need to do, we gonna get you up out of here, right?
Yeah.
And then you can say, like, kind of the school choice for whatever you want to say was put on top of that to say where there are failing schools, you know what I mean? We need to pull the fire alarm.
Mhm.
What Dr. Harris just narrated was exactly where I was going. And I think the understated piece of this is that there has been such a hyperfixation on STEM and I would say as a caveat on career and technical education, vocational ed. And what has happened very nefariously and very quietly is there has been a de-emphasis on the humanities and the liberal arts.
Mhm.
And that's dangerous because it makes education pretty much just about workforce preparation.
Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly.
it's a very industrial, it's about market efficiency and all these things and sending you into a job where guess what? You don't have to think. We don't need
They
you
come on.
because there's no
Come
ROI on
on.
you thinking, right? We need to be able to send you out there. And what folks noticed right away was STEM is great, but if you can't apply these things, right? If you can't situate the moral, come on, we're in this environment right now where AI and everything, and the moral aptitude that will come to you as a result of the humanities is missing. So
Yeah.
that, like as Dr. King said, you have guided missiles and misguided men and women because there is no humanities, there is no affiliation with the liberal arts and the whole 360 of learning. And the other thing I would say before I leave is I appreciated earlier the mention of this. This is human. This is human behavior. We're dealing with human beings, and I want
Mhm.
to pick up where Dr. Stewart left by saying the other piece is like his. I can't imagine being a young person growing up in this environment. Listen,
Right.
I already had ADHD. And so the amount of distractions brought about by social media, by short form videos, by smartphones, it has already, and this is like the last piece of it. There are studies now that are saying the moment we introduced laptops instead of textbooks, that had a deleterious effect on the engagement and the ability and the aptitude to be able to sustain for a long time. And so a lot of this is like the evolution of human history and technology too, and just not really paying attention to the human side of what's happening. So just beautiful points all around. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. And FYI, I just submitted an article to what was it, Ed and C around that very topic. So I'm hoping that they'll pick it up and publish it. That's right on. Dr. Hunter and then Miss Edmonds.
Yeah, listen, Dr. Ford, you hit on something that I get on a high horse about. That's like the importance of humanities in this like age of I guess we can call it anti-intellectualism or whatever, or this high need for STEM. That's not the point I'm going to talk about, but you sparked it in my head, and I just had to highlight like yes, 100% to everything you just said. I want to go back, y'all, just a couple of conversations ago with what Dr. Stewart and Dr. Boone were talking about and just kind of think because I put my accountability hat on, Grant, when you asked the
Mhm.
question of kind of the intention behind these tests, right? And I think one of the things that I have to study, or one of the things that I studied because I wasn't alive to be a part of it, was the publication of The Nation at Risk in 1983. And I think with that, what it ended up doing was for America, it kind of gave this framework unintentionally around, competition and the things that y'all are talking about now that led to things like the No Child Left Behind,
Yeah.
and even the Every Student Succeeds Act. And I think that's the thing that kind of laid the foundation for this idea of like accountability models to even come into existence just through those basic conversations, or through that basic publication. Looking at it from the seat that I was in, not my seat as the assistant principal, but as a person who was overseeing some of these accountability systems, I don't think, or I don't believe that the original intention for these things were like inherently malicious, right? I think the states wanted to find a way to make things transparent, and they needed to make those things transparent on a federal level. But when we look at some of the things that Ms. Smith was talking about, when we start disaggregating that data a little bit more, and we start seeing, that achievement gaps are being confronted, when we start seeing what things are being ignored, and then we take a bigger look into it, and we're starting to see like, oh wait, not only is there major gaps in this data, but there are also major demographics being impacted on a significant level as a part of this data. Then it's like now we have to try to find a way to flip these things around. We have to try to find a way um, to address these inequalities now that we've illuminated these inequalities, right? So I don't think that they were rooted in a malicious intent. I think a lot of times policies like these that impact schools, they have this kind of like compliance logic, right? So they're more so, we just want you to do X, Y, and Z, but we're not really focused on instructional design. So
Yeah.
like Dr. Harris was saying earlier, we use these assessments for checkpoints. So they were once used for checkpoints. Now they're not used for that. Now it's like, oh, no, 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 we need to check and make sure you're doing X, Y, and Z, and these are the measures that we're doing them by. And of course, I could get on the high horse about why those measures are wrong, but I'm in a room full of educators, so y'all already know those things. But I just want to highlight that part of the conversation.
Yes.
Well, it's not just. Oh, I'm sorry. Is somebody else going?
Edmonds, she wanted to go next.
Go ahead, Mom.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Boone. I'm more of a realist. You can't test your way to success. You have to teach your way there. We can talk. We are testing our kids with the state testing. We give them CFAs, then we give them benchmarks. We are losing the art of teaching because we're worried about the success that we are going to have on an EOC or EOG. And when the focus goes back to building up our teachers' skills, building up their ability to go in the classroom and have strategies to teach, that's when change. We don't know our kids anymore. We don't take the time to learn our kids. We have disconnected from them because we're worried about the state regulations. We're worried about what everybody needs. We're worried about what the state thinks. We don't even have a budget. I'm not going to speak on that. The only state in the United States. But when we go back to focusing on the needs of the students, experience teaches you. And nothing we do in class anymore creates experience.
You're talking right.
I'm gonna drop my mic and I'm gonna cut it off right now.
No, listen, you talking right. You can keep going on that because you're talking right. Listen, Brad Johnson, I don't know how many, and I'm gonna let you jump in. Whoever wants to jump in. Brad Johnson, I followed Dr. Brad Johnson. He says that, and listen, don't quote me. I'm giving you the gist of it, but he says something around the fact that it's sheer insanity, right, to expect teachers to implement both differentiated learning and standardized testing. So you got to choose one or the other, right? Either you can effectively support diverse learners, while, enforcing a one-size-fit-all assessment system. And so that to me is the bogus idea of how this high stakes testing, we're preaching, that buzzword differentiation, right? But yet we're testing them on a standardized test. That is a contradiction like I've never seen before. So I just want to throw that in there.
But
I was going to speak to you saying how.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
When you were speaking about, the intentionality of the test, and I just think about, as a former elementary educator and especially a third grade teacher, the school to prison pipeline, that's real. And when we see the impact of how the test scores kind of drive discipline rates or underfunded schools or racial bias and literacy gaps, as well as opportunity gaps, because I don't feel like it's an achievement gap. I feel like it's an opportunity gap, but those mainly affect a specific demographic, mainly, Black children. So when we talk about testing, especially like third grade tests, it's important to understand how some policymakers use those test scores as early indicators of long academic outcomes, as well as the number of prisons that need to be built in a specific area. And so I just feel like
Wow.
those potential, those are systemic barriers that we face, and they're kind of results from these testings.
And I
Yeah.
remember that when LeBron James was trying to build his school, while educators mostly knew those things, a large number of the members of the public were unaware of that. And I remember him saying that, and people being appalled, like, how could people base the number of prisons needed off of third grade test scores? And of course, me being an educator, I was trying to explain, how that jump goes. But I'm glad that you said that, because it is real. And like you said, that data is used for a number of things. So, and I too would support your statement that it is an opportunity gap, because being in HR, I see the difference between those schools who are performing and not performing, and the availability to get the highly qualified staff in there, which sometimes increases the
Yeah,
gap when that presence is not there.
that's true. Mhm.
Yeah. You see, y'all are so good. Y'all made me come off mute. But really, two quick points. I spent over half my career in the classroom
Yeah.
teaching in high school. And to this day, I stand behind this statement. Every standardized test that we administer to students is a reading test. They're all reading tests. Dr. Witherspoon was chiming in because he said he was a math man earlier. Take a math EOG, EOC, and what do you have to do? You have to read. It is a reading test. We missed the boat because we are no longer teaching our children to be critical thinkers, and we're not teaching them to read. That's one point. The second point I wanted to make is going back to what my friend Monica said a little earlier when she was talking about the art of teaching. We are a highly intelligent group of individuals sitting here tonight. I would challenge us to be able to give one solid definition of what a good teacher is. We know the characteristics. We know what good teaching looks like, but it's become so convoluted because of standardized testing, because of accountability, because of scaffolding, because of all those things. It is hard to define what good teaching actually is. Now, and you can tell people these are the characteristics. If you do this, oh, that was great. I saw that. But what is good teaching defined as? So when we go in as administrators and we're going into classrooms and we're trying to coach up young teachers or a first year teacher and they're having issues, we always want to point to classroom management and those types of things. And of course, if you don't have control of the classroom, you can't teach. But I'm going to go back to what Rita Pearson said years ago in her TED Talk. Children don't learn from people they don't like. And until we build some relationships with kids, we come in the first day and we hop on the pacing guide. We don't know what the definition of teaching is.
Yeah.
We don't know the kids' names. We don't know how to build a rapport with them. Until we get back to building a rapport with children where they trust us and understand that we're here and we have their best interests at heart, we're going to
Yeah.
always be on this merry-go-round.
That's very true. That's very true. Perry.
Yeah, I just really kind of, Dr. Stewart, you really kind of brought it back to my point that actually Miss Edmonds mentioned about building relationships. That's first and foremost. Before you can teach a kid anything, you do have to know who they are and they have to know who you are. And I think, especially with all generations, I think, but it really is highlighted in this generation, the motive to like, who are you? And what do you want from me? What are you trying to get out of me? What are you doing here? It's really what students are. I think growing up for me, asking an adult why I had to do something was really seen as disrespectful, where it feels like this generation feels like it is a right for you to tell me why you want me to do this. I think they're more starving for attention. And we can debate about why that is. But I definitely feel like in this generation with the individuals now, they have to have a relationship with you to learn from you, learn with you, be comfortable in the environment that you create in order to learn. And it's not something that's just inherited or something that they just feel like initially. It has to be developed. You have to provide them some type of comfort or safety in a relationship, positive relationship, in order to get the most out of them. And that can't be measured in one day. So it kind of brings it back to the whole testing and assessment piece. Like, we're really talking about how kids perform one day without thinking about what they're going through the whole 179 days prior to that one day when we tested them. And we're all humans. We all have bad days, but the kids that do perform better or perform well for the most part, will say, because they like their teacher, they enjoyed their teacher, they enjoyed the environment first, and then they learned. Right. So, I want to throw that part in there.
Yeah.
So,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, Dr. Grant.
No, go ahead. Because I was going to extend his thought, but you go ahead. And I'm looking down because this is how I can see you. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
You're good. So what I've noticed is that everyone on the call so far has spoken from the teacher standpoint of no child left behind and testing in general. So now I'm going to speak to you from the scholar standpoint, because I was actually in fourth grade when No Child Left Behind took place. So during that time, what I noticed is that, and it's funny because Dr. Mo also mentioned that school to prison pipeline, those numbers are determined in third grade. So third grade is when learning for me no longer became fun. Kindergarten was great, first grade, second grade, third grade, and then fourth grade happened. That's when No Child Left Behind occurred. Now, that particular grade, although the end of grade test actually, one of the first were actually administered in between 92 and 93. So I was, a young kid at that point. However, North Carolina at that point then adopted they became the model state, if you will, for end of grade tests. And what I noticed is that I felt a shift, even as a young kid at the age of 10, that learning was no longer fun. So mentally, they told us, you will not move on to the next grade level unless you pass this test. So think about, as a 10-year-old, you were not necessarily graded or tested to determine whether or not you go to the next grade level. And now all of a sudden, I have to pass this test. And if you don't pass, you get a chance to retake it. But if you don't get a chance to retake it, you will have to go to summer school. And if you don't pass it in summer school, then boom, you cannot move forward. So mentally, that really played with a lot of us. And I think that is where the true testing anxiety became. We always felt that we had to perform at a certain level in order for us to be deemed as proficient, or for us to be deemed as a master in our particular grade levels. But now what? Now we're thinking about that as educators who we are now having to, as Dr. Grant stated, teach to the test. We have to remain on pace. But when that pacing falls off, and then we still have North Carolina check-ins, and our scholars are performing poorly because we simply have not had enough time to actually get the testing or the pacing aligned to the North Carolina standards.
Yeah. So you all are answering so many of my questions. I'm like, y'all are flying through this, because my next question, and I think you already answered it, was, what is the emotional and psychological impact on students, when their identity becomes tied to a test? Testing starts now in third grade.
Can I
The
speak on
anxiety,
that?
yeah, you definitely can.
Our students are tested before they walk into the building. There is no test that their test of life has already put them at a shortcoming. So I think what everyone is saying is we have to go back to that. The first thing you got to have in your schools, and I know there's a lot of administrators on it, call them people who used to be administrators. If the culture of your school has to be the first tackle that you go for, because if your culture is not there, learning will never be there. So before you can even get to the test, you have to create a culture where the kids are even comfortable and feel safe about coming into the building.
That's right.
So there are so many layers to get to where we need to get to. But I know most of you are in those schools now. If you don't feel safe, your teachers, your students don't feel safe, you can't get to that learning. And that's what a lot of rural school districts are facing. It's because we have the public school, let's be honest, public school systems have become the alternative school. And because you have so many, and I believe in school choice, I believe you have the right for your child to go to any school that they want to go to. But we have to make it a priority for the culture to come back to our schools. I come from a neighborhood school that doesn't exist, but we have to go back to what is important, and being safe and coming, and that culture is so key.
Yeah. Barnes.
Yeah. So Dr. Weatherspoon, he was talking about being afraid as a child, like when he saw that shift around third grade. I want you to have a Sophia Petrillo moment with me, if you will, from Golden Girls. And I want you to imagine this is like your second or third year teaching. And I'm going to date myself here, but there was a judge called Judge Manning that had all of us shook. Okay, because he was the Suge Knight of education in these struggling districts, such as Halifax County and Weldon City Schools. And, this judge was threatening to not only close down schools, but to take the livelihoods of educators. And so we were assigned these state assistance teams at that time, and many of them were amazing. But during that time, the students begin to see us fear. Okay. And so you're looking at your teachers, your principal, the people that you trust and you love that's guiding you. And there's this fear there. It was so intense for a moment. I remember the state assistance team like telling us we had to do individual lesson plans for students. So many of us were walking out of these schools 7:30, 8, 9 o'clock at night. Now, I look back on it now and I'm grateful for some of those late evenings because that's how I met my husband. But at the same time, I was leaving there to go work at two other side jobs that I had. And I was a cheer coach and, doing all of those things to make ends meet as a starting salary that year of $23,000. Okay, I see the heads nodding. So you remember that time. But I say all that to say the students saw that. They saw the stress, and we began to lose the joy of teaching, and they began to lose the joy of learning. And to me, in many aspects, that's where we saw the disconnect with the community. We stopped having programs in school. I was just telling my niece the other night, who's an educator, like, what happened to these grandiose Black history programs and things we would prepare for all year? All of those things got off the grid because we got so hyper fixated around moving the dial. And let me just add one more piece that really put the pressure on there. And that was they said, okay, we're going to incentivize educators. You're going to get this amount of money if you do better. So not only do you have the pressure of closing, and now you're in competition with your neighboring teacher who you playing with, so that you can get, those extra funds. So I don't think it was a malicious intent, like you said, Dr. Hunter, but I also see there were so many unintended consequences around this that I don't know how we're going to reel it back in. And then you're tossing words like, oh, let's innovate and let's do this when we're trying to just mend so many broken pieces around the educational system. So I think I would have been just remiss if I didn't talk about like when that happened, how it happened, and the fear that it placed in the classrooms, in the schools, and the hearts of children.
Yeah. Dr. Ford, it seemed like you were itching. What was So we can't hear you.
Can y'all hear me? My computer's lagging. I'm sorry. Can y'all hear me?
Definitely.
Yeah. No, I was just she was rapping. And I mean, I remember being in the classroom on the tail end of those days, and the quandary, and this is honestly what got me interested in education policy, because I think that so much policy, not all of it, does not have ill intent, right? But it does have disparate negative impact. And I remember, because you want to improve and you want to be a leader in your PLC and in your department, but if it's between you and me getting this money, I'm actually disincentivized from
Yeah.
collaborating with you, which
Yeah.
actually doesn't push the craft forward, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't lead to innovation. It doesn't lead to the best lesson plans because there's a monetary incentive there for me. And I ain't making a whole lot of money, right? I'm sitting here with this master's degree and I'm making sub 40,000, right? Doing everything I can, volunteering after school and being a part of clubs. That right there, just the poor the compensation floor on top of the the dangling the carrot and the stick piece, it
Mhm.
robs us of really being able to partner with our neighbors and put the best lesson plans together and do things to collaborate and really push innovation. So I was having a I guess I was triggered a little bit. I
Yeah.
remembered some of those moments.
Yeah.
So that's what was happening.
So let me ask this question because I'm burning to ask now because I had a conversation a couple days ago with two board members, not anyone that, is connected to where I am. But they were trying to explain to me that I hear you because I'm saying, like, what, listen, I'm getting ready to have this kind of, Zoom, this podcast, whatever. Like, what can we do? What is it? Can you all do something to, make this change? And they're saying, we hear you, but, right? Because our money to run this district is tied to test scores. So if we don't do what the state is telling us to do, if we don't push accountability, if we don't push things in this way, we don't get the coins. And so we don't get the coins or we get less money, then we have to start cutting positions. So there are a lot of things that have it's a domino effect. And so I started to understand a little bit more around what they have to deal with in terms of operating the district, but it didn't move me enough to not want to speak on this, right? Because I still feel what I feel. So if you all can, maybe kind of shift around a little bit the conversation. Erica, Miss Smith, I don't know. I was just so used to calling her Erica. I'm
Just
sorry,
call me Erica.
Erica. I want you to address because you say you want to jump in, but I do want to talk about that level of um, I don't know the word, how they feel around, and some of them I really do think that they are sincere about. I hear what you're going through, but there are some things that they have to deal with too. And then how do we begin to shift and change? What can we do? So Eric, I want you to make your point, and
Well,
then
I wanted to speak more on how we can evolve
yeah,
our accountability
okay,
program and system. And I want to chime in. When I was in the General Assembly, there were two pieces of legislation that were passed that I sponsored that I was most proud of. One of them was the changing the count me in, not count me out. And so what was happening based on scores, all students who scored at fours and fives were supposed to be opened up to higher math opportunities to be able to enroll in a higher level math course. But what was happening is that what we found when we looked at the data was that students who lived in affluent areas, 4 out of 5 of these students who scored at advanced levels were enrolled in higher level math classes. Those were in the affluent areas. But
mm-hmm.
when we looked at the lower income areas, the high minority areas, 3 out of 5 students were not enrolled. And so it was 1 in 5. It was an atrocious number. And James, you will remember that because you were on the State Board of Education at the time. And I do remember us having a conversation about that. And so if these scores, if these tests were doing what they were supposed to do. So don't get me wrong, I think we're talking a lot about the negative, but what I want to put in context is that initially some of this accountability testing forced districts to look at where they were underserving student populations. it calls us to address the opportunity gaps. Like I think Dr. Mo, you mentioned that. So how are our students doing in our gap groups and our opportunity gaps around minority students, et cetera, lower SES, and looking at those categories. So while it was had the ability to spotlight where we had the inequity, it was also exacerbated the issue of these underfunded populations. So I just wanted to start there. And so I sponsored a second piece of legislation and it almost made it. It made it through all of the committees, but then I don't know what happened after that. But do y'all remember when the formula was based on 80% actually what a student did on one day, one moment in time, and 20% on growth?
Mm-hmm.
That is ridiculous. As a teacher, as an algebra 2 teacher, or math 2 now, then it was algebra 2. How can you expect me to grow my student to algebra 2 when they came in and they didn't pass their math 8 test, they didn't pass their algebra 1, math 1? So how do you expect me to even get them to achieve at this level? I mean, just, give me more on growth.
Mm-hmm.
So I sponsored legislation that would make it 50-50, and but it would add other measures. And so I had the opportunity to serve on SREB. And when on SREB, I had the opportunity to look at California, look at their accountability system, and then look at Virginia's, because Virginia, it was all just based on the SOL. But I am so thrilled with our new accountability system, where the overall score or index for a school, only 50%, if you're talking about a high school, 50% of the score is based on the student's test performance in mathematics, ELA, English, and then science. Social studies doesn't even count. But where we move points were in other areas like the three E's, their readiness, their 3E readiness. What percentage of your students are enrolled in a higher learning? What percentage are employed? What percentage are enlisted? And so, if we're really preparing students to be globally competitive, we don't need to just look at isolated test scores. What we need to
Right.
look at is how well are we doing preparing students for a future?
That's right.
So, what can we do? We can evolve our accountability system. And so now they actually have it broken up in Virginia into two parts. You get accreditation that's based on your compliance, and then you get accountability that's based on performance. How are your L students doing?
Mm-hmm.
How are your subgroups doing? But what your absenteeism, your graduation rates. And so when you put all of that in the formula, there were so many schools that would have been low performing or deemed to be, having to go under a memorandum of understanding. But now those schools are on track. And not only on track, but you have a school that's a school of distinction in Greensville County High School. And this is a school, 3 or 4 years ago, it was considered underperforming because of the isolated information that you were looking at. And so, what we have to do as practitioners and professionals and advocates for students, we need to move more away from this standardized, heavy weighting, high stakes testing that only looks at a standardized test. And we need to look at other measures of preparation for our students.
That's good information.
Dr. Grant, if I could add to what Ms. Smith was saying, and I think to kind of emphasize what you were talking about earlier, the big disconnect, because I was naturally just jotting stuff down. And I think the big disconnect, it happens in four areas, right? When we start talking about like what our governing boards or our board of education, the people who oversee our districts, it comes to like 4 or 5 areas. It's the narrowed curriculum, right? Because this is what we're seeing from the building level lens. The narrowed curriculum, we see the teacher burnout, we see the overemphasis on short-term proficiency. So especially like in the high schools, like Ms. Smith was saying, right? A student takes English 2 for one semester. We're going to base how well they are in English just off of that one semester of testing, right? And then we see the students identified or their identities tied to their actual test scores.
Right.
So I think sometimes where the disconnect happens is that the board members, and I know this isn't all board members, I'm just generally speaking, they don't always see the downstream effects of some of the things that's happening, right? The board members see we have this policy that we have to, enforce. With this policy, this is what we're asking you all to do. But we, the people on this call, the teachers in the building, see it a little bit differently. And I think, it goes back to the question of, what's the intention behind it? I don't think the gap is, uh, intentional or has a bad intention behind it, but I do think it does speak to the distance that they have from implementation, right? So when I was hearing Ms. Smith talk about what are some of the things that we can do, some of the other things that I also started talking about or started thinking about was really reframing that idea of accountability into capacity building, right? So asking questions like, how do we design this accountability system that builds instructional capacity rather than simply labeling performance, not just for the students, but for the teachers too? Because if the long-term effect is, I want teachers to stay in my district, I want teachers to stay in my building, I can't penalize them for the scores that they have, but I can provide them professional support so that they can grow those scores around. So when we talk about that, trying to think about how can I make this a capacity building opportunity for every single person that comes inside the building. The other thing is like also making sure that there's this really fine balance in translating that data into actual narratives around instruction, right? So it's not just that 42% of my students are proficient on their EOCs. Sometimes it is, I also need to know what percentage of my teachers are novice, what the student growth percentile is, what interventions and structures were put in place so that it's not just a matter of these are the numbers, but no, this is a story that I have to actually go in and tell. And then I think also introducing multiple measures of data, but doing it gradually, right? So it's not that I'm just going to throw all of these things in at one moment, but I am going to try to figure out which things am I balancing the most, or which things are we going to make a priority in our district, and then let's measure those things out so that we can get a more balanced scorecard that Ms. Smith was talking about. And I think those come through things like providing trainings to the boards around how we're looking at and unpacking that school report card data. It comes in and seeing how we're checking up on the schools in our districts beyond what we just see from a numerical or a quantitative standpoint. And I also think, bringing in teacher and student voice into these conversations early on, especially around those governance spaces, right? Because you might say, me as the principal, me as the assistant principal, or another leader inside of the school building, I don't want them a part of this conversation. But the people who is directly impacting, the ones in the classroom, we have to find some way to make sure that their voices are elevated. Because when we don't, what ends up happening as a result of these things are the things that we talked about earlier, right? We get a loss of electives. We get, tests being the thing that don't really necessarily motivate students to come into the classroom. We get this perception that shifts around school climate and school culture. And it's like, I don't want to be there anymore because all we're doing is X, Y, and Z. So as y'all were talking, I was just thinking and jotting down some of those things. And it's like, for us, the structural question just has to go back to the board, right? And I think is if we change what we measure, then we can change what we prioritize. But it's like, how much of that is what we're going to prioritize, with the understanding that right now some of the things that we're prioritizing are solely for funding. How can we add to what's already being prioritized so that we all feel like humans in the data that's being presented, and we aren't just a number, and we aren't just a score, we aren't just all of these things. So those were the things that were kind of coming through my mind as we were talking about that stuff.
Dr. Herna, you resonated something that I have to struggle with all the time. You are educating those who are making the decisions about education. Because the face of many school boards has changed. They are politically driven now. And many people get on school boards and are able to make decisions who are not who are not educators, or not involved directly in understanding funding, allotments, and things like that. So it is very hard to take school boards who overturn every election season, or could overturn, and some of those decisions drive whether or not they will still sit in the seat. And you're constantly trying to educate them on the impact of their decisions.
Yes. So let me just read a couple of these comments real quick. So I won't call anybody's name, but if you all go back, because I don't know what their name's called, but we have one that says the distance is created through board members not needing specific credentials to be on the board. Someone someone else says, can you ask if we can begin a shift or begin to move the mountain? Is the shift possible, or do we develop tools to help us live and be effective in this new reality?
Can I listen? Can I take a shot at that? Because I live in this space. I be kind of dystopian. I'm not gonna lie.
Sure.
And I'll begin with alluding back to what Erica said earlier, which I thought was so incredibly important. And I was proud of her advocacy for reforming the accountability models. But this is one of them instances where I do think that was done with ill intent. It was done, the 80-20 thing was done intentionally. They knew exactly what it would correlate to. And they knew exactly which schools would be looked down and frowned upon. And it was designed to erode public trust.
Mm-hmm.
So in this environment right now, I think we pull on our ancestors, and this is why, like, you won't catch me getting mad. Like, I'm a mixed market guy when it comes to schools too, because Black people have always been both and folks. You know what I mean? We've done whatever and all the things that avail themselves for us to have a quality education or whatever the issue is at the time. And so in that liminal space where we kind of don't know if the whole country gonna collapse and if we're gonna have to create our own thing, or do we continue to advocate for, the institutions that we have? I say we do both. That's why what Dr. Barnes is doing, I think, is incredibly important. We need folks in that space innovating outside of the traditional system, making spaces for folks to be able to, get an adequate education. And I think that that's necessary. And I think we need to, it's an unpopular opinion for some, but if the motive here and the principle is equality of educational opportunity, well, then however you get it, you got to get it. But I also think that institutionally, whether it comes to the school boards or what Erica alluded to, a lot of this it happens electorally, right? The political process informs who sits on your school boards.
That's
And
right.
in North Carolina, the legislature, they're the ones who create the accountability, the state's accountability model. And so we have to begin to really dream and go back and say, what is for us the true purpose of education?
Mm.
Once we figure out what that is, we need to be able to distill that and then advocate for elected officials who will build a model of education that conform with accountability metrics that conforms to all the stuff that we said. If we want to hear from students, we need to build that into the accountability model. We had an opportunity, I want to say, with what was it, ESSA or ESSER, we had to create and reform our models, and we decided not to do it. But once we get that vision of what the purpose of education is and what it should look like, we need folks who are in positions of power who will advocate for that. And then maybe, just maybe, we'll start to see some things change. But just in case, we need to be having an inside out strategy. You know what I mean? Like, be doing what on the outside while we're trying to reform or transform things on the inside.
That's right. That's good. Yes, Ms. Barnes, you go ahead. Listen, y'all don't have to ask me. Y'all just jump right on in. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just trying to keep a little order there. But,
Yeah.
Dr. Hunter, you inspire me. Like, you are the next generation of this work, and that makes me hopeful. It makes me hopeful because this is a really different time in education. And I'm sure the people before us said the same thing. And whoever asked the question, like, can we shift? Absolutely. But it is going to be a courageous shift, right? And it's going to require people to step up and have a voice. I want to go back to board members. I don't want to speak on any particular board because boards are different everywhere you go. Where I am now, the elections for board is a major thing. And let me tell you why. It is so major here because these people dig into education. The board that I currently serve under now, like they have so many conversations with the public, with the people within schools, the leaders, to try to figure out like what is it that you're looking for? What is it that you want for your children? And they ask very hard questions every board meeting, so much so that I am tuned in. Now, I wasn't a big fan of attending board meetings when I was in Charlotte or in Halifax County at all. I can't even remember hardly going to any of them then. But now I'm glued because the questions that they're asking are really hard. But I also see how in the community, they support the communities that they serve, that they're assigned to, by making sure they understand not only what the community wants, but like how they're going to get it in alignment with the district. So we should really be putting a lot of responsibility and accountability
Very
back
true.
on the board members. And we have the power to influence and educate them. If you think about when they are not of education, my background, right? Or if they don't even have a pathway to it other than they went to school, they may have gone to high school, I mean, to college. They're coming in at an entry point where they're not knowing. So that education that they get from us is going to be so important and critical to them making the right decisions for children. Not I'm on the board because it's something I want to do as a resume builder. Not I'm on the board because I didn't get the job I wanted and now I'm vindictive around something. Are you making the best decisions for children? And we have to challenge them to do that and not let them off the hook in doing so because that is their responsibility. And so when we're not tasking them with doing that, we're not serving our part as community builders and taxpayers. I want to emphasize that as well.
You better talk. Listen, I'm getting ready to say it. You better talk because that's my family. You better talk because exactly you hit the nail on the head. And, you know, I won't say much on it because I want to be very careful how I
Right.
speak toward
As
this.
you
But
should.
Right.
Mhm.
right. But I will share with you that well, I'll put a period there. I'll just say you know, word up, right? So everything you just said, right? Just
Dr.
word
Grant,
up. Yeah.
Dr. Grant, can I jump
Yeah.
in really
For
quick?
sure. For
Um,
sure.
First of all, you know, these folks are on fire tonight. Barnes said something like 30 minutes ago. It still resonates with me. And she was talking about the effects that testing had on you. I never took, in full transparency, I never took a piece of medicine until I became a school principal.
Mm.
Not one. And the testing and all that accountability was so tough that all of a sudden my blood pressure was always up when I went to the doctor. I mean, I'm just going to tell y'all the truth. And
Yeah.
my doctor would
You
always
got
say,
it right.
"Why is your
Been
blood
there, done that.
Yeah.
is your blood
Yeah.
pressure up in April? Are you kidding me, brother? Do you know what I got going on at school?" So, I mean, just the truth. And speaking about, you know, the question about school boards, I'll try to speak on it, dance on it, dance around it, and you know, all of us stay employed. That's the you know the main thing.
Amen.
The job of, if you look it up, the job of school boards in North Carolina is very simple. It's three things. It's governance. You know, they deal with policy. They deal with budget. They approve budget. And the third thing is they hire a superintendent. And that superintendent is the person who is the visionary who is supposed to drive that district. Um, I will say this because now I love my time in the classroom and as a school-based administrator. But one of the most enlightening points for me is now I work on the other side of the house. So I work in operations and I get to see the full picture of it now. So onboarding is so very important. So, you know, we look at it from my side, from the operational lens. Uh, we don't teach children, but I tell my seven departments, we are the people, the first people and the last people that children see every day.
Yeah.
We are the people who feed them every day. We're the people who ensure that their classrooms are comfortable, not too hot, not too cold. We're the nurses, we're the registration, we're the faces that people see, even though we're not in the classroom.
Yeah.
In dealing with that, what I've learned is when I bring people in who do not have a background in education, you have to have a really good onboarding process. I think the same is true of board members. And we have to look at our processes and procedures. My safety director is a guy, if he says protocol once a day, he says it 50,000 times a day. It's all about processes and protocols and making sure that people understand what we're doing, regardless of where they came from, their background. We have to ensure that they know what's going on, and we're all there for the good of every child. Not one child, but for every child.
Right.
And so I think if we go back to that with your regards to board members, let's look at the onboarding process, and so they get a full understanding of things. And we say budget in North Carolina right now, we don't even need to talk about it. It's rough, but everybody needs to understand the role that we play, and how, even though Dr. Ford was spot on, even though we have these situations and these circumstances, we got to figure out how we're going to be successful in them.
Yeah.
If they don't pass a budget this year, we still got to run school. I still got to run buses. We still got to feed these kids. We still got to make sure the roofs doesn't fall in. We have to do what we have to do,
That's right.
regardless of the situation. But we all have to understand what the common goal is. We all have to be educated in how we're going to make it to the common goal. And we all have to ensure that we're growing these thinkers in the best possible situations.
That's
So,
right.
that's the big thing. And I've worked in a few districts. I've had the opportunity to work in a few districts and to see, different versions of school boards,
Yeah.
and different functions of school boards. So it's not the same everywhere, but it's very important when it comes down to the success of the children.
Yeah. So I have two final, maybe three and a half, two and a half final questions. When we talk about this reimagining schools or reimagining education, if you could redesign accountability, what would you measure instead? If you could redesign accountability, what would you measure instead?
Okay, I dropped some things in the chat already. I must have anticipated that question.
Let me see what you said.
I said if we're
Okay.
going to use test scores, let test scores be one indicator, but not the only indicator.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we are truly being accountable for producing productive citizens who can compete globally, then we need to teach students how to compete. And no one ever leaves high school or K-12 education and works in isolation. Our students need to be able to collaborate. And in
Yes.
collaborating, they need to be able to apply the knowledge that they have learned.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at the whole movement around performance-based assessments, and that's part of my dissertation that I'm working on, the studies show that students who have a rich experience in performance-based assessments as opposed to high-stakes testing, they build stronger skills. They're able to compete in the workplace. They're able to be more competitive in secondary education, post-secondary education. These are the students, 90%, upwards of 95% of these students are all enrolled in a community college 2-year program, 4-year program, or they go on to enlistment in the military and then, further. But they all have options because they were able to demonstrate their knowledge through performance-based assessments as opposed to an end of grade, end of course, or SOL test. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that we should move toward project-based learning, have a workforce connection, community-focused projects. We need to teach students how to go out and solve these problems that are in the community. Isn't that why we all get educated so we can build a quality of life,
Yes.
earn productive income? So these are the measures. So if we're going to co-create a new accountability system, it should have multiple measures. limited measures just on test performance, but whether our students are placed in a position where they can be enrolled, employed, or enlisted, that they have greater future opportunities, and that we're growing all students. And I think truly when we can do that, we broaden what we measure, then we broaden what we value.
Yes, that's good. That's good. You better preach, girl. Yes. Others, please share your responses to that. If you could redesign accountability, what
Well,
would you measure instead? Perry.
well, well, I think adding on to Miss Smith's point about broaden the value and broaden the measures, I actually like to broaden the accountability because I feel like the accountability kind of shifts towards one section of people, one group of people more than others. And I would love for us to have more of a shared accountability in our measures and everyone more have a focus on, okay, what do I bring to the table? How am I impacting this measure, this accountability, this indicator, and have more of a shared value, shared communication. We talked about collaboration throughout the night and accountability, but it just seems like the focus is really on accountability lands on certain individuals in the system. I think Dr. Stewart also talked about all the other components that you don't necessarily think or see about on a regular basis that also adds to the comfort level of a student, comfort level of a staff. So any accountability measures or any indicators that we have, I would love that for it to be shared accountability throughout the group of education and not just land on just a building leader or just the teacher or just
Yeah.
the student, but have more people involved in, okay, this is your part, this is your capacity, and how are you helping navigate or promote student performance.
I like
I
that.
also think we need to start including parents in the conversations. Several parents don't feel comfortable being engaged because of the way that they've been treated, whether as a student or when they enter these buildings and we're speaking that teacher language, and so they don't feel
That's right.
like they have the knowledge to or the know-how to be involved in their child's education. But it
Hmm.
has to be a school, community, home collaboration to tap into the holistic child.
Yeah. And I think because we talk that way, the teacher talk, as you said, parents come in and they feel like, I don't even understand what you're saying, but they'll shake their head, yes, yes, and go home and haven't been, educated on anything. It's like, I'm just showing up because and then some parents don't even show up because one, you go to a school board meeting and there's, next to nobody there. And where the parents need to be there, right? We get the phone calls all the time. And I'm saying, and I'm talking about throughout my career as a leader, and I'm saying, go to your school. Well, why are you saying, you're asking me, heck, I got to go ask, I got to ask them, right? So we got to figure out how we can add them to the conversation. And they actually, and I don't think that they don't want to be. I think they don't know how to be a part of the conversation. I think that's the broader thing. Dr. Witherspoon, you were off mute. I'm sorry.
At the end of the day, I feel that accountability should expose opportunity gaps, not hide them.
Mm,
So when again thinking about that equity indicator, so we need to think about who benefits from it and who doesn't, right? So at the end of the day, when we disaggregate data and we're thinking about the discipline referrals, we're thinking about if our scholars even have the courses or the resources to be able to get them to and through college, but then tying in that special education piece. Special ed is a section where a lot of people try to stay away from because
yeah.
there's so many laws to it. I know
Mhm.
myself, I will not step into a special ed conversation and do so comfortably where I know what I'm talking about because I don't want to end up in jail. I don't look good in orange. So
Right.
when we think about it, accountability serves from first the equity component.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, Quadric and KP, y'all both just took me there. I love what you said about expanding who is accountable.
Mhm.
And when I said earlier, when we were looking at, if you look at the analysis of the report card scores, it did not show an indication of which students were brighter or which students were more academically prepared. It just shined forth to put a spotlight on who are the students who are most under-resourced. So if you want me to meet these accountability measures, then you're going to need to invest in me being able to do that. So I look at our funding models. We have to look at our funding models. If we truly want to impact students, then we need to follow a different model of our funding. So one of the models that I've looked at is the one in Louisiana. And so they had put forth an opportunity for students, let's say, for example, in the more affluent parishes, students were funded at $4,500. That was the ADM per student. But in the poorer parishes, students were funded at $9,000 per student because it would take $9,000 to make it equitable, to be able to close those gaps, to provide highly qualified teachers, to provide the resources and the extra help opportunities and the funding for all of that, so that these students could meet this measure. But if you're going to give everybody the same amount per student and you expect there to be any improvement in our ability to measure students and grow students' content knowledge. So if we're looking at who's going to be held accountable, let's hold the legislature accountable. I can say that now. I'm not in there now. But look, y'all are making all these changes. You want all these metrics? Well, give us some money. Invest.
Well,
Invest in what you
Erica,
value.
How about give us a
Erica,
budget?
how
Give,
do we
give,
do
give
that?
us a budget
Give us a
first. Let
budget.
that budget have some money.
Erica, how do we do that? And hear me when I say this. I hear people say this all the time, like, we gotta do this, we gotta, with the legislation, we gotta do this, we gotta blah, blah, blah. Like, how do we do that? Because I'm thinking of, just those of us who may not be as courageous. We don't know what that means. Does that mean picking up the phone calling? Does that mean writing letters? Does that mean hosting town halls? What does that mean to actually get this needle moved? Because I think talking about it is good. And I think we've been talking about it for years. And it's not like, we're the first ones to have this kind of forum, but we're still not seeing the needle move. Or if we're seeing it move, maybe I'm blind to it. I just don't see it. I see it getting progressively worse. What does that mean? Like, what do we do? How can we galvanize? How can we be involved? Because those of us, like, I'm here talking, and when you say that, the first thing is like, what do I do? How do I do it? How do we make that move?
I mean, it's all of the above. We have to do
Yeah.
all of the above. And I hate to just, generalize it and say all of the above, but going back to what Dr. Ford said earlier, I mean, it's who we're putting in the place of power and who we're putting in these seats to make these decisions. And so all politics has to start on the local level. Who you putting on your school board? Who you putting on your boards of commission? Who are you putting that's going to go to the General Assembly and advocate? And who are you electing who can support funding education adequately and appropriately? I mean, heck, somebody put in the chat, just with the Leandro money. Just give us the Leandro money. Y'all got it. Y'all had it. You were supposed to send it. Stop sitting on it. And so if they're going to sit on it, then elect someone who's going to push for that funding to go where it's supposed to go. So we have to start at every level. We have to get our parents involved. We have to advocate for our children. We got to fight for our children. I mean, because, it's too many times, like, it does take a lot of work. It does take a lot of effort, but it's worth it. And we have to do that on all levels. We just got to push that. And we got to form these partnerships, these community liaisons, and bring and build collaborative power around the issue to make the change that we need.
Can
Do
I
we
just
do that in the safety of, I feel like I have to be careful with this question. Do we do that in the safety of, let me back away and start again. Those who are on the front line, the teachers, the administrators, how can we, and hear me when I'm saying it, so I hope that you all will hear and understand what I'm saying. How can we do that in the safety of our positions?
Mm.
Do you all understand what I'm saying?
I think I do. I think
Okay,
I
so
do.
if you can stretch it, then I don't
Yeah,
have to say it.
and to illustrate that very point, speak to the heart of what you're saying, I can say this
Mm-hmm.
because I'm positioned differently, right?
Yes.
And so, like, let's be clear. It was alluded to earlier, right? Like, I am the executive director of a nonprofit. I'm only accountable to my board.
Mm-hmm.
So I could talk a little greasy, you know what I'm saying? And, without there being retribution. However, if you work within a system and you serve at the pleasure of elected individuals, there will be retribution potentially. And so you're not, and then there's policy as well. I am very clear that there are those of us who are positioned within this space to operate with a little more autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I'm going to say this. I'll go back to what Erica said when she talked about building power.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we're dreaming of, everything we're talking about, there are numerous ways to advocate for that and how to actually make it happen that you were asking, Kenya. But the truth of the matter is when you reverse engineer it has an electoral process. Like who you put there is the starting place, right? Like we can scream like we've been doing about releasing the Leandro money, but it ain't gonna happen until we get different legislators in there. And that's just the bottom line.
Right.
And there's an opportunity right now with elections going on and primaries for us to take this. We just happen to be in this window where we can actually make good on this, right? There's school board elections that'll be happening this year. Statewide elections that'll be happening. So
Yeah.
we need to take our demands to these to these elected officials or these candidates and say, hey, if you want us to vote for you, these are the things that we demand for you from an educational platform, because you have to be able to leverage that. Because the facts of the matter are, for a lot of folks who are in cushy positions, that their power isn't threatened. They know what our concerns are, but they don't have an incentive to change. And so, in moments like these, I will make a shameless plug. Some of the work that we're engaged in at the local school board level. School board advocacy is known as the Public School Strong Campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So these are with all 115 districts. We're starting to organize stakeholders to show up at their school board meetings to make demands for more honest, inclusive, fully funded education. Some of the things that we're talking about. That's stuff that regular folks can do. I wouldn't advise that folks who work for the state or work for the local district do it. But you got loved ones, you got people. We can be, we can be creative in how we do stuff. And so for those who have the positional freedom to do it, there are ways to get involved. And now is a prime time. But for those who don't, I mean, you need to figure out how to keep your paycheck coming in, right? Listen, the economy hard out here. Don't nobody do nothing crazy.
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like keep, what I mean? That direct deposit
Yeah. And I
wanted to
think
hit
that's
every
the
month.
thing that frustrates someone like me who, I want to be on the front line. Does that make sense? I want to be the advocate, right? So I'm going to do something like this. So then people are going to hear, all the things, right? But then it's like, no, I want to do the James Ford things. I want to do the Erica thing. I want to do the Barnes thing, right? I want to be able to do that. And I'm going to use that word, safety within what I do. Because I see everywhere I go that there's a need for something different. Like school has to be different. We can't keep doing school the same way and expecting our students to be better, be greater, right? I want to shift what that someone's talked about the culture and building those relationships. Like you got to start there first.
Mm-hmm.
But if you walk into a space and you don't have the autonomy to do it, or you don't have, not that you don't have the ability, but you just don't have the autonomy to do it. Am I making sense?
Yeah, but
Because
Dr.
you
Grant,
walk into a
Yeah, you're
space and it's
restricted.
like,
Mhm.
this is what you have to do. And this is everywhere I've been, right? And so it frustrates me so much. I'm so passionate about my kids. I'm passionate about the people, and I see what we need to do, but there are restraints, constraints. There are, blocks, stumbling blocks to things that I would say, my God, I can see school being so amazing if I could just
But
dot,
Grant,
dot, dot. Yes.
Dr. Grant, let's step back for a second.
Okay.
Let's step back and look at the broader picture. Okay.
Okay.
I think Dr. Ford always spot on as we advocate to our people. Let's get involved. Let's vote. Let's hit the streets. Badger those legislative people. Send those emails. Make those phone calls.
Yeah.
But from your chair, from where you are, I want to step back and let you know that you are making a difference.
Hmm.
It starts with a mindset.
Yeah.
The mindset to even be able to put on something like this
Hmm.
is the start of the change.
Hmm.
So I can't let you leave here with any level of frustration because you are a part of reimagining education and what it's supposed to be like because you're taking it one step at a time. Okay, you're bringing folks together. I'm sitting here. Somebody was talking about the screens earlier. I have 3 screens 2 feet away from my face. It's just not good. But I'm looking at the viewership. I'm looking and I'm seeing who is logged in to this right now. There are educators, there are people who are taking the time to listen to this because this helps to change and shape individuals' mindsets.
Hmm.
It starts with one. All right. And you're the one who is starting it. So don't ever, girl, you better not never, as long as I'm around you, sell yourself short to say you are not a part of the change. Okay.
Yeah.
You are a part of the change. You're making it happen. And yes, different people take different steps and plights in life, and we appreciate them and we celebrate them. But every one of us in our corner of the world is making a difference and making a change, and you are impacting people that you don't even know that you are impacting.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for that. Hmm.
That is
Yeah.
that is so true. I love the fact that you call this reimagining because the conversation is starting and it starts with conversation. We can't help that our kids take 20 tests between 3rd grade and 12th grade. We can't help that. That may never go away. But there is talk about some changes in our accountability. But as
Yeah.
long as we keep your children first, no matter
Yes.
what you do, keep your children first and you'll be successful because till this day all the educators can Miss Barnes, everybody up here has been a teacher. Every time I go on Facebook or every time I walk down the street, there's a child that comes back to me,
So true.
and
So true.
that's my success. It is
That's
not about the
you
money.
actually had one in here today who talked about I saw her name. I don't know what this is about, but I saw Miss Edmonds' name and I clicked on it because she was like the best. If you go back through the comments, you'll
And
find it.
that's
So
what is value. And as long as you
yeah,
keep the children as your first priority, you have a young man over here, a Dr. Hunter. I don't know how old he is,
yeah,
but his thought process is a future.
yeah.
As long as you have those strong people around you, what was Lauren Hill's record? Miseducation.
Mm-hmm.
Let's turn that around. We have turned it to de-education. But
Mm-hmm.
as long as you go back to what the foundation of what we were about is making teachers stronger,
Yes,
we can't change legislation. But I always say my classroom's my house. That's one place I can control.
that's
Yep.
right.
So
And sorry.
no problem.
And Dr. Grant, I'm watching what you and Dr. Hunter are doing. Like every week, I'm glued to seeing your newsletters and your updates, and I also watch your viewership or your, partnership with people collaborating with you, picking up over time. Use your parents.
Mm,
Use your community because they are hungry. They're
yeah,
hungry for change. I am a product of Halifax County. I keep up with what's going on there. I keep up with what's going on in Mecklenburg County as well. But they want change. And I tell you what, boards, locally, state, whatever, they don't listen to principals, they don't listen to teachers, but they're going to listen to two key stakeholders. They're going to listen to parents and they're going to listen to kids.
That's
Okay.
right.
So what you do is you leverage your parents to speak for you. When I couldn't get things done, I would call up one of my parents who was really, really vocal, who was just like always ragging me about something. I was like, listen, since you got on my case about XYZ, let's talk about you going to this person and advocating for us to have this particular thing for the school, you know. So get them in a place where they can proficiently talk about what it is that you're looking for. They know what those updates are per the state, have them glued into things that are happening, and then they stand up for you and talk at these board meetings, and they are your rep. They are the people that are speaking on behalf of your school and what you need for your students.
Thank you. That's good. Last question. What gives you all hope right now? What gives you all hope? If you think 20 years from now, when students reflect on their education, what is it that you want them to remember? Not the scores, but experience, right? What gives you hope around 20 years from now? Or even in this moment, right? What is giving you hope?
That I see it like you had mentioned with Miss Edmonds and her folks. I have someone when I was teaching at Northwest Halifax, and I was the head football coach there, like 20 years ago. Your current basketball coach was my junior quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
To see the success that he has and how he is impacting young people right now gives me hope that we planted some seeds and they're still growing. When I'm over at K&G in Raleigh and I run into one of my former students that I taught at Northwest, and she makes me cry because I ask her what she's doing, and she says, I'm teaching social studies at Durham Jordan High School because of my favorite teacher in high school. And I was like, wait a minute, I taught you 4 times. So you talking about me?
Yeah.
Yes. That's what gives you hope that you've done some things right and you planted some seeds. And when it's time to turn it over and let the young Dr. Hunters of the world take this thing and run with
No,
it, that you left it in better position than you found it. And that's what it's about. It will continue. Education, hope springs eternal. Every
mm,
August, hope springs eternal. You know, we get worn down, beat down. May and June, we're dragging, but come August, it's time to get up and go again. Hope will always spring eternal. So keep doing the work.
thank you. I'm hoping that everybody will answer that question.
Well, I think what gives me hope, Dr. Grant, is the fact that I get to be in spaces with people like that are on this podcast tonight, this webinar tonight. You know, knowing that there are other people out there fighting aside me, that we're fighting together. I think that's what gives me hope. When I'm able to see it, when I'm able to have conversations, when I'm able to just experience moments like this, it gives me hope.
I'm gonna
Thank you,
piggyback off the Dr. Harris. I was gonna say the same thing. Having connections and collaborations like this, knowing that there are some lifelong educators that are committed to this good trouble, showing up for our students, fighting for justice and learning, and so this is what gives me hope as well.
I
Thank
would
you,
say the
Dr. Mo.
passing of the torch. I have been beyond teaching. I have been a strong advocate in my work with Dr. Grant as being a BT supporting our beginning teachers coming into the profession. As one in HR, teachers don't look like they used to. And to see them grow, walk in the door, know knowledge, building relationship with students, and seeing them grow and become our next leaders, it warms my heart because that is what I'm very passionate about is
Yes.
as people exit, getting them in and keeping them around because they're in the fight with us. They want to be there. They want to do what's best for children. And we know it's all a labor of love. And while Miss Smith, I'm going to say Senator Smith, talked about, money's good. We all do it because we have a passion for something in
Yes.
the educational field. I
Yes.
don't like curriculum. I like people. I'm human resources, but that's just seeing and seeing that torch being passed and seeing them ignite passion in students that I felt that I used to do with them is what drives a lot of my work in HR.
Yes. Thank you. Now I want to do cold calls, but
Dr. Grant, I'll say a
yes.
two-part thing. I think part of what Dr. Mo and Dr. Harris was talking about, being able to connect with other educators who share that belief that things don't have to be this way, always just makes me feel like I'm not crazy. So that always is just refreshing, just to be in the room together with you all. I think the other thing for me is going to always be the students, whether it be the short-term stories or the long-term like stories
Yeah.
that you get to see. Being able on a daily basis for them to see the grind. It's always so funny when like a student stops me in the hallway, especially now, and they'll say like, "Oh, Dr. Hunter, where are you going?" I'm like, "Oh, like I gotta go do this real quick, sugar." And they say like, "You always on the move," and it's like, yes. And I think I love the fact that they see that, but then also like long term, because I taught high school, I'm really fortunate now to be able to see some of the students graduate. My first group of kids or second group of kids just graduated college. So they're like full on adults now. So to see like those stories happen and them talk about, like, oh, I remember being in your class and like, oh, I learned this inside of your class. And like knowing earlier, someone mentioned this idea of like, them being engaged citizens and knowing that those small things that you did, that you were just being yourself and you're just taking care of the next generation, knowing that those things stuck with them and that, they're going to pass that torch on to. For me as a younger person in education, it's just really, it gives me a lot of hope because it just knows that like, even with my 20 something years that I still have left before retirement, like that there's already a group of people coming in to already like pass that torch to.
The time will fly by fast. Don't worry.
It will. It will.
So
I get hope. I was in Greensboro not too long ago visiting my niece, who is close at my age, so she's more like my sister, but her daughter was doing lesson plans for herself, which is my great niece. She just started teaching in Greensboro.
Let's go, niece.
That gives me hope. She was so excited, y'all. She was talking about how she was going to decorate her class or how she had already done that. I mean, the joy was so palpable coming from her. I'm like, this is why.
Yeah.
This is why we stay in the game. This is why we model this. This is why we hold true to this, because of this next generation of educators. And so we have to keep it going because they're watching us. They're looking to us for guidance. She's always calling and asking. And even in a family full of educators, like, we know the importance of this work. So that truly keeps me grounded, keeps my boots to the ground, and excited about the work that we do.
That's good. Anyone else want to add?
I'm going to say,
and forgive me for having my camera off. I had to get up out the school, so that security system went off. But I'm traveling back home now. But for me, hope is realizing that we are living in our answered prayers. It's like we have always and oftentimes prayed for the success of our kids. And what we don't realize is that hope lives in the unseen victory. So you think about those scholars who thought that they never mattered, right? The staff members who felt like they truly don't make an impact, but yet there's a system that we are in where it says that it's impossible. But those staff members keep showing up every day. The scholars keep showing up every day, proving this system wrong. So I think for me, hope isn't necessarily is a feeling. It's more so a proof. And I've seen it time and time again.
Thank you.
I was waiting because I was trying to find this story. I think it's a lost story by Dr. Seuss, but I can't remember it. So I'll have to paraphrase it. But Dr. Hunter gives me hope. And when I look at the future of education, I'm thinking about this doctor who was walking through this desert, and the desert was dry, the ground was hard, and the ground was cracked up, and everybody else just saw a barren, dry desert and all the frustration that goes with that. But the doctor saw the cracks in the ground. And so the doctor decided to plant the seeds anyway. And when she planted the seeds anyway, then eventually, with the shadows, the slightest shift, there was a slightest shift in the sky, and then it started raining. And because she planted anyway, she provided that care, she provided that equity, she provided that justice. But because she planted anyway, the rains came. And when the rains came, the green grass grew. And it was a pasture of green grass that just converted the entire ecosystem. And it converted that ecosystem. It just reminds me of the hope in education that I have for the future. And it's hidden beneath the ground right now. It's quiet seeds right now, but the seeds are waiting. And when that rain of opportunity finally falls, my hope is that we have that opportunity to see our students rise in the green.
Yes, I love that. I think I heard you preach something at my church years ago. You had, you always bring your props with you.
Yeah, yeah.
And you had your soil, you had your little whatever you call a little scoop thing or whatever. And it stuck with me because some will plant, some
Yes.
will water,
Some will water, and God will
and
give the
some was
increase.
exactly. And
The
so
increase
I,
will
I
come.
may not see, and I thank you, Dr. Stewart, for sharing this and everybody for sharing it, speaking that to me, because sometimes I really do get discouraged because I feel like I want to do more, right? I look at people like you that I admire that are doing and listen, I'm getting ready to say it again, Dr. Stewart, but hold on, doing the work, right? So I hear you. I hear you. But maybe I won't get to see the increase, right? Maybe some areas I'll be the planter. And maybe some areas I'm the waterer. And maybe, for some of the work that some of you've done, maybe I'm seeing the harvest of the work that you all have done. And maybe that'll be my case as well. But what gives me hope is that I do have seeds to plant, right? And, maybe I have a little bit of water. Maybe I'm shifting, helping to shift that ecosystem, as you said. And so I'm hoping that we all have those seeds. Perry, you were off. I don't want to cut you. You were off mute.
Oh no, you're fine. I wanted to hear you keep going, but just like you talked about planting the seeds, and it just brings me hope to faith that our kids will be successful, or at least we're putting in the energy to give them every opportunity to be successful. I know one of my first years in administration, I heard a speech from Manny Scott. He was one of the kids that was in Freedom Riders, and he talked about how the movie highlighted one of his teachers, but he heard that story, that lesson, that motivation over and over and over again. It finally connected with the last one, but you never know. He said he had to build on the motivation of his second grade teacher, who he blew off, he didn't like, he didn't care about, but he remembered their lesson when it finally got to the high school. And it's just like every motivational thing you do, every positive energy you apply to the kids, you might not see it come to fruition, but it's building upon the next one to the next one to the next one. And we just have to build these kids up because they're going to affect the next life, who's going to affect the next life. So that just gives me hope, that faith that I'm putting in just my one little block that's going to help a kid reach their goal.
That's right.
And
That's right.
and I was just wondering, when you say that, I think when you have your first graduation, it will all be worth it. But are you going to complain about the drought, or are you going to prepare for the rain? So
prepare for the rain.
Prepare for the rain. So you got this. And thank you for providing this forum for us. Just keep the conversation going and keep the main thing the main thing. And you got a team around you.
Definitely.
We appreciate you.
And I hope you remember that.
Definitely. Dr. Ford, and then we're gonna wrap it up.
I ain't got much else to say other than I see that y'all, all the things you named, to me, those are not happenstance. I see the hand of God at work, and that's enough for me.
I love it. So listen, we're going to wrap it up. So, as we close tonight, I just want to remind, especially, and Miss Battle, I saw your comment in there. I'm going to pop you on the back of your hand when I see you. Um, but as we close tonight, I just want to remind us of something important. Education was never meant to be measured solely by numbers, right? So education is about transformation. It's about possibility, right? It's about preparing students, not just to pass tests, but to really lead lives of meaning and impact and purpose. And so I believe that we have the power to redefine what success looks like in our spaces. So we have the power to reimagine education, and I'm hoping that we're going to do that. And most importantly, we have that responsibility. And I'm taking it on. I'm ready for it full force. And so I want to say thank you to this incredible panel. You all are so amazing. Thank you for saying yes. That means the yes is always important, right? You get a whole bunch of people, no, no, no. But I think each time that I've called on you all for anything, you've been there, and I appreciate that. And thank you to our viewing audience. You all have a great night. It is recorded, so it'll be able to play back. But I appreciate you all. Have a good night. Thank you all so much. I love y'all.